Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back, my dear viewers. As we were going to the break, we started talking to Sale Suleiman from Calderdale, who is the Cohesion, Equality and Diversity Officer for the Council around hate crime and anti-Muslim hate crime. And obviously this is a huge area of concern, particularly to Muslims throughout the country. We have seen in the last few years this enormous rise in anti-Muslim hate crime. And unfortunately, in a couple of cases, it's even led to the murder of people because they're simply Muslims, one in Birmingham, one in South Yorkshire. And we've seen a number of attacks on Muslim mosques and places of worship. And I know the government have set up this funding program for places of worship because I was involved in the government's advisory body when that was set up. But not many Muslim organizations have taken up the offer that the government made. I know the bureaucracy around that is quite difficult to navigate. But coming back, as I was saying to Sale, I mean, Muslims, particularly Muslim women, sisters, who wear the hijab, who are easily identified, wear the niqab, are obviously the obvious victims, unfortunately, from attack as far as anti-Muslim hate crime attacks are concerned. What's the situation like in Calderdale? When we talk about Calderdale, for people who don't know Calderdale, what it stands for, Calderdale is a conglomerate of a number of towns which makes up the district of Calderdale. The centre of that district is Halifax, the town of Halifax, which is I think the fifth largest town in West Yorkshire, after Leeds, Bradford, Wakefield, and then it's Calderdale. Kirklees and Calderdale, sorry, yeah. So we have a large, relatively large Muslim, mainly Pakistani community living in that area. So what's the situation like in your neck of the woods, Sale?
I think the situation's quite balanced. We have experienced, following the incidents that have happened in national issues, for example, when we had the Lee Rigby incident, there were individuals who were targeted due to wearing the hijab or the clothing. We had comments being made. And I think, Iqbal, you talked about the increase of far-right activity. So we do see, for example, sometimes the far-right presenting on the back of some of the CSE, which is child sexual exploitation grooming cases, which provides them the platform to come out to various districts and boroughs to try to create the divisions between communities. What we have got in Calderdale is the Calderdale Hate Crime Partnership. This manages a number of organisations, for example, the police, the council, we have the housing organisations, probation and CPS, and local authority departments. And what we do is that we work together on a strategy to ensure that our communities are focused and that they can report hate crimes when they do occur. And then it's for us to ensure that the right services are applied and that they can get that support when they require it.
So do you have third-party reporting centres in Calderdale? I mean, normally people go to the police station or ring the police. And over the last few years, since Macpherson, since the murder of Stephen Lawrence, and the Macpherson report came out, which encouraged the setting up of third-party reporting centres. There were quite a lot of third-party reporting centres initially, and then we lost quite a lot of them. But now they seem to be coming back. So do you have third-party reporting centres where people can go and report if they're the victims of hate crime?
Yeah, but what we have 30 third-party reporting centres in Calderdale. I think Iqbal's quite right. When the Macpherson inquiry report came out, it provided the communities of interest an opportunity to report hate crimes and incidents at a location of their choice. Initially, I think across West Yorkshire, there were over 300 third-party reporting centres. Within Calderdale, we've got these centres established across the various townships that we have. So people, individuals who become victims of hate crime can report at a location of their choice. And that was central to the Macpherson inquiry, to provide members of our public and community a point where they can report it at confidence, because they may know the centre that they're going to because they've actually been in there a number of times, or the staff that they actually come across, they've known them as well. So they have the confidence to report these incidents and crimes.
And how are these centres? I mean, are there centres within the Muslim community as well? like Muslim community centres or mosques and places like that?
We have a couple that are based within the community organisations.
Right.
For example, the Citizen Advice Bureau, we have 4 of their centres established.
Right.
We have them in leisure centres, in libraries, frontline council offices. The most important thing is for people to recognise where and how they can report the incidents and crimes when they do take place.
Do you find that some people, although they're the victims of hate incident, they dismiss it because they feel that the police and the criminal justice system will not take them seriously? I mean, this is one of the findings of the McPherson report in terms of race and policing. And do you find similar attitudes amongst the Muslim community? I mean, you work closely with the Muslim community in Calderdale.
Yeah, I think part of it is when people report the incidents or crimes that take place, it's very important that public services, for example, the police and the council, get it right, because within our networks we have communities who live side by side, and if they receive a service that isn't up to the actual recommended presentation that they need to have, then they will talk about it. So people lose the confidence to report the incidents when they do take place. Right. Part of my role is, and I work with the police very, very closely within the partnership, is to ensure that we have the right package in place. So when a victim comes forward, it's very, very important that as a starting point, that we provide them with up-to-date information, what we can do, how we're going to be reporting the incident of crime taking place, and then to make sure that the victim is updated. We initially talked about the kind of loss of services. So, for example, the police at the moment are struggling. In the past, there are not many police about. They are now recruiting again. And part of that recruitment process is, and I've been to do the training to the new police coming in, is that they need to ensure that feedback is imperative, that the victims understand exactly what's going to happen. My role within the hate crime partnership is to ensure that the organisations that I'm working with provide the feedback to the victim.
So do you get every day incidents being reported to you that from the police or from the third party organisations to say, Sale, last night X was the victim of a hate crime, just letting you know, it's been reported. Do you get that level of information?
We get the information regularly. We've got what we call a single point of contact, and that single point of contact is where the information comes through to us. So if we see a pattern emerging, then what we can do is ensure that the resources that we have can come together to deal with them issues.
Right.
So for example, if we saw a pattern of crimes taking place against a certain community, we know the location where it's taking place, and then it's about partnership working to ensure that we can hopefully deal with the issues when they present.
I mean, one of the criticisms of the police recently has been from the Her Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary, which is now called, I referred to this in my discussion with Mark Burns-Williamson last week, HMIC, FRCS or something like that, the Fire and Rescue Service, they've taken on a much wider role, has been that following the McPherson report around faith and hate crime, the government had set a target that when somebody reports a hate crime, the person will be visited within, I think, 1 hour or 2 hours. And in the majority of cases, victims have not been even visited by up to 5 days. So there is a disparity, and that has been picked up by the inspectors to say police need to tighten up on this. And I know there's some discussion going on at a very senior government level and the policing structure as well, to try and probably eliminate or erode that target that was being set, because under the current circumstances, it's unlikely to be met. So one of the things that people complain about all the time is that when they report a crime, whether it be burglary, assault or whatever it is, that when they report it, like you say, they're supposed to get feedback, but they get very little feedback at this moment in time. Or much more importantly, police will just send you a crime number and says, this is, you're a victim, here's a crime number, deal with it. That in itself erodes confidence in the community, in the public. And I know this is not, your area of work, perhaps it is. That how do you rebuild that confidence once people start losing confidence in the police service? And this is what I asked Mark as well last week, Mark Burns-Williamson, that there's a huge disparity here. People expect some results. So if you're a victim of a hate crime, you expect an outcome. Now, most people expect an outcome which says, you know, you go to the courts and the court will deal with people. And the majority of times, that doesn't happen. How do you reassure people or give them confidence that their case has been taken on seriously and it's failed because of lack of evidence or whatever it is?
I think it's a very relevant point, is that, and it's very important that we understand the structures of reporting. Part of our work is when we're explaining to victims of hate crime, when the report comes in, is what's going to happen with their report. And that's, I think, the most important factor. Because if the victim it clearly understands what we can do to support them, what the measures are going to be to take them through that journey that we're taking, and then hopefully if the service sticks to the standard, then we get the outcome that we're expecting. What sometimes happens is that a report comes through and we expect to have a response within 24 hours. I think going back to the initial discussion, within the services that we have, it's quite difficult to provide that service.
Right.
What we are doing in Calderdale, and I think it's happening in West Yorkshire, is that we have hate crime coordinators based in the police station. So I have regular contact with the police's hate crime coordinator. If a victim comes through to myself to report a hate crime, or they're not happy with the service that's been applied, then what I can do is make contact with the police, and straight away, I'm not chasing up a local bobby who's gone out to investigate it. They can go onto the crime information system, they can download the investigation up to where it's got to, and then what I can do is provide that feedback to the complainant or the family that's requested that information.
Can the complainant access that information themselves?
They can do, but it might take a bit of a while, because I mean, obviously you're going to have to go through the 101 number, and that obviously sometimes it takes a bit of time to get through to the officer. What I can do is, because we've got the access and partnership working, is that we can get the information quite quickly. As long as I've got permission from the complainant, I can share that information very quickly, and it's going to be recent. So when the police have gone out, now if the police have missed the interview, they haven't been out, we can also chase that up as well. And part of the hate crime coordinator's role in Calderdale, which is Paula, who manages that, is to make sure that when the report is made, when it's actioned by the investigating officer, whether they've been out or not been out, to meet the complainant to take the report. Now if they haven't, we can then raise that to the next standard, and we can ask for answers to be provided to the complainant and to myself.
Right. So any victim of hate crime, whichever hate crime it is, race, gender, disability, sexual orientation, anti-Muslim hate crime, I mean, you deal with all hate crime, don't you?
I do, yeah.
Not just anti-Muslim hate crime, you deal with all hate crime.
Everything.
So anybody who's a victim of any of these characteristics of hate crime, if they report to you directly, right, then obviously you will make sure that you manage that case in a way that you're always up to date with what's happening with that particular individual. I mean, Calderdale has what's the size of the Muslim population of Calderdale?
It's around 14%. So
it's quite high.
So you're looking around probably 15,000 total minority community, which is made up of Pakistani heritage and Bangladeshi heritage, with a very small number of Indian and Sikh heritage and Jewish heritage communities. Right.
And obviously the majority, as you say, are from the Asian subcontinent. Right. I mean, and the extent of anti-Muslim hate crime being reported to the police in your area, how many incidents or crimes are being reported on a regular basis? Because you are I think you are probably more structurally organized in terms of the hate crime management of hate crime and the intelligence gathering than I think some of the other local authorities that I've been to. So how many incidents of hate crime are being reported to you on a regular basis?
We normally pick up at an average between 35 and 45 crimes per month, and that information is shared between partner organisations. These might be incidents and crimes that take place, so we're looking at people reporting the incidents, and on a regular basis, on a 4-weekly basis, we have something called the Community Impact Assessment Group meeting, called SEAG, and within that we have data shared between our partners. Right. In that meeting we have young people services, we have the council departments, the police, the fire service and the NHS, and we bring together the data to look at what's taking place in the borough that we have. So we're looking at mapping out what's taking place.
Is this to identify hotspots as well?
It is, absolutely, yes.
Right,
and we also have the antisocial behaviour team, which then reports through, and what we've got set up in Calderdale is any report that comes through to the antisocial behaviour team is that the information is then shared with myself as a single point of contact. and we're filtering that through what we call a community safety inbox, which is a single point of contact where the information can be held and shared with people like myself who deal with hate crime across the borough.
Right. So in that sense, obviously you have what seems to be a fairly well-working, oiled working mechanism around hate crime reporting. But in terms of the number of people, the incidents, if you're saying between 35 and 50 a month, do you have any idea the extent of the people who are not reporting it? Because one of the biggest issues is that nationally, the accepted figure is that 70% of people who are the victims of hate crime, whichever hate crime it may be, do not report it to the authorities. And the reason behind that is that they feel that the authorities will not take them seriously, or they will not do anything about it, or they will not get justice at the end of the day. In your view, how many incidents are not being reported in Calderdale? And what message would you like to give to the residents of Calderdale to say, if you are the victim, please come and see us?
The message is exactly what you said, Iqbal. I think it's very important that members of the public within our communities across any part of the country need to report hate crimes when they happen. And I still feel that we are the tip of the iceberg where people are not reporting it. And part of that might be to do with they've reported incidents and crimes in the past. They've not had the appropriate support, so therefore they feel that the organisations that are working on this area of work aren't taking it seriously. Or there may be this thing that it's going to be my time wasted. Again, very, very important that people report the hate crimes when they do happen, because it provides people like myself a measure of what's happening, where it's taking place, and what we can do in partnership to ensure that we can put in place the appropriate measures to deal with them hate crimes when they do happen.
Well, I mean, I'll reiterate that. I know we're going to go for a break very soon. Let me just emphasize what Sales has just said. Until and unless we all report every incident that we are, unfortunately come across, and we collate that information sufficiently in quantity and with quality, the government will not change policy. Governments change policy when there's empirical evidence of the extent of a crime taking place. At the moment, as we say, 40% of the hate crime, 52% of the increase in the hate crime is anti-Muslim hate crime. But even that, if you look at the figures for this year, they've gone up from 5,900 in 2016-17 to 8,336 in 17-18. In the round things, in terms of population, that feels quite small. And I'm sure there's more than 8,500 Muslims who are victims of hate crime, and they're not reporting it. And unless and until we report it, we will not see any real policy change taking place in this country at this moment in time. Halaki, what I have to say is that if you look across Europe and other parts of the world, Britain is one of the best countries in the world when it comes to recording hate crime per se. I mean, if America's got a population of something like nearly 300 million, the number of anti-Muslim hate crimes reported, or hate crimes reported in that country, is about 2,500. So you can just imagine, whereas in this country, the number of hate crime reported for the last year in total is 80,000 hate crimes from the figures released on Tuesday. So we can see how well we are doing in terms of capturing the data, but not sufficient numbers of people are actually reporting it. And that is something that Muslim community actually really needs to do, and make sure that every incident is reported so that the records can be built up, so that that can then be used as evidence of how we need to change policy. We're going to go for the break now. Inshallah, we'll come back. I mean, that is really interesting. Sale, thank you very much. Let's come back to it. Don't go away. Make yourself a cup of tea, coffee, whatever we're going to do. We'll be back very soon, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.